Good morning, everybody. It's good to see you all. Some time ago, I came across an inspirational American businessman called Blake McCoskey. And you may have come across him before if you wear a pair of Tom's shoes. But he was the guy that in 2006 was wandering around after his university years with a backpack in Argentina. And he saw kids running around the streets with no shoes, playing football. And Blake was with a traveling companion, and he went off down one of the back streets, and he found a cobbler, a shoemaker, working in the doorway of his shoe shop, making these moccasin shoes. And he bought a pair for $1. And later that night, astute businessman, he took it back to his hotel or his travel lodge or wherever he was staying, and he sold that pair of shoes for $2 to his traveling companion. So he'd made $1's profit. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the story a little bit later on and how that applies. But what he'd done is effectively taken an asset or bought an asset with someone else's profit, and he was able to give that pair of shoes away to somebody, and he gave them to a kid on the street. And I'm going to tell you exactly what that means in terms of the model in a minute that we've been looking at for housing, because it set me on a really remarkable journey those years ago. And I've come from a health tech background, so I sold my business in July 2018, having worked in San Francisco and other places around the world in health tech. And I thought to myself, I've had enough of the commercial environment, that kind of hard thrust of commerciality. How could you do all of this that we've been accustomed to over the past few years, raising finance, networking with people, looking at a black book, and saying, who's who? How could you bring them all together to try and form a business that was doing something remarkable for society? And that's really where Goscombe started. And from Blake's perspective, just to revisit that just for a second, what he'd actually done with that pair of shoes by giving it to a kid on the streets was that he'd acquired an asset that was effectively debt-free. And as it was debt-free, it was unencumbered, and he could give that pair of shoes to the kids, or he could keep it. Now, not only had he bought that asset, but he'd supported the local community as well. So the shopkeeper had earned something, not once, but twice. And also the kid on the street had benefited as well. So you can see that what had happened was that through Blake, he had managed to keep this money within the local economy, and he'd done something for society, for local businesses, and also he'd done something for himself as well. Now, our world is changing, and we all know that. Over the past few weeks, there's been some radical changes, both in the political landscape, but also with the late Queen just this past week. And I think if you went back over the past 10 years, you could say that the market as a whole has changed in terms of shareholders are now expecting CEOs and business leaders to give a much greater return, to look at profitability, to make sure that the shareholder value goes up, to make sure that they're being more profitable and competing better with the competitors out there. Employees are starting to look at things and saying, well, it's no longer a job for life. And customers too are looking at things and saying, we've got different expectations as well. So we're all aware that the world has got a number of problems, and I'm not going to stand here and tell you about all the problems, because we all know it. We hear it every day. Nutrition issues, lack of affordable housing that Mark referred to, the poverty around the world, deforestation. The list goes on and on and on all the time. But I think the one thing that makes things very different this time around, in today's environment, is that we're all very much more aware of these issues. Back in 2014, I came across a chap called Hamish Manwari, who's the Chief Operating Officer for Unilever. And he stood up and addressed a conference of business leaders in Singapore. And he spoke about the 3G model. So this is going to get a little bit academic at the moment, but I'll come on to Goscombe in just a second. He spoke about this 3G model, where he spoke about growth that is consistent. He spoke about growth that was profitable, and he spoke about growth that is competitive. But he also said that that's not enough. There has to be a fourth G, and that G that he referred to was growth that is responsible. It means not just driving economic gain, but creating some sort of social impact as well. And there's compelling evidence that's now coming to the fore that suggests that companies who adjust their business models to take account of that fourth G are the companies that seem to be doing better than their peers. And again, we'll come on to that in just a few minutes. None of us really in this room can afford to be bystanders at the moment in this. We're not able really just to sit back and observe from a distance what is going on in our local communities. We've all got a responsibility to play. And when we talk about that, we mean that we've got to start thinking about a business model that is an and model, a model that says we make profit and we do something for society. Now, a few years ago, I met a chap called Gary. That's not his real name, but Gary was a 42-year-old man who was living in a kiosk in my hometown of Eastbourne on the south coast. And Gary has actually been in the building trade, come to think of it, and he'd lost his job, his marriage had broken down, and he was now living rough, sleeping rough in a tourist kiosk on Eastbourne seafront. And I was going along there one morning, met him, we bought a coffee and we had a chat, and over the weeks that I got to know him, I became quite struck by his desire for a real sense of belonging within the community, within the local community. And here was me in a town that is probably one of the richest towns on the south coast, relatively speaking, and we just didn't seem to be able to have the wherewithal to pull things together to make a difference to somebody like Gary living on the seafront. And that kind of, that stunned me, because I know that people thrive when they have a home and meaningful employment. And that, to me, was a wake-up call to see whether, from an academic point, it was a chance to refresh the way we thought about business and move away from a model that was just purely profit-driven and reverse it so it wasn't profit first with purpose afterwards, which is where many companies admittedly are today. But could we flip that model so it was no longer a model that was investment in making just profit, but it was an investment that started in community? I wonder what our businesses would be like if all of us in this room, when we sat around a board table or in a meeting room, what would our businesses be like if we put purpose first before profit? I know it's a deliberately provocative question, but I just wonder for a moment what it would be like. You know, our businesses would be transformed if we started to put on our board agendas social purpose on an equal footing with finance, operations, HR, and all these other things that we talk about. I wonder what would happen if our businesses were changed in a way so that when we took a business decision as a CEO or a business leader or a director, I wonder if we made every decision based upon what impact is it going to have to society and community. Would our businesses be changed? I think they probably would. And that's where the model from Goscombe originated from. Gary is one element of it, but a concept of reversing so profit and community are on equal footing, and every decision, everything that we do, every action we take, every pound that we spend, we always stop before we do that and say, is this going to make the world a better place? And we've got a thing that we often say in the business that we want to make the world, we want to make our business decisions to be the world that we are aspiring to. That's what we're trying to achieve here. So I want to ask a question. Why do businesses exist? Is it to make a profit? Or is it to create community value? Is it for shareholders, or is it for society, customers, employees, and the community? You know, the conventional view is exclusively to earn a profit. which is not as narrow-minded as it seems, because to earn profit, a company tends to have to be forced to do something for society. And let me explain. It has to make good quality products, otherwise you won't have any customers. It has to treat its workers well, otherwise they'll leave. It can't pollute the environment, otherwise its brand will be tarnished. So in a way, we're all looking after the community and the environment anyway, but is there more that we can do? Let me give you an example. It's been in the headlines this past week, or past month maybe. Patagonia, you've probably come across them. Patagonia is that US company, environmentally responsible brand that makes the outdoor clothing and has an unwavering commitment to sustainability. Many of Patagonia's management decisions run counter and contrary to what we expect from a profit-driven business. For instance, they give 1% of their profits to environmental causes, and they famously banned Wall Street bankers, for example, from buying their fleece with their logo on it. You know, Patagonia is a true example of a company that lives up to its brand purpose. And furthermore, and I think this is kind of cute with what they've done, they've made a number of decisions that copycat brands would never have the strength, courage, or conviction to do the same. And that's very telling. Let me just explain what I mean by that, because, you know, a strong part of the Patagonia discussion is that how they oppose Trump's views on the environment, for example. They announced that they were giving away the Trump tax cut, estimated at £10 million, to environmental causes. I think Unilever did the same thing. They spoke about it. So did Ben & Jerry's. But I don't recall Ben & Jerry's or Unilever or the others giving the money back, unless I'm mistaken. You see, Patagonia were really living out what it was to do a true purposeful business. Shortly after meeting Gary, I founded Goscombe to deliver socially purposed modular housing off-site within our own factory, where we lock in the social value and we reinvest up to 50%, or actually in fact more than 50% of our profits back into society, particularly the communities in and around each development where we get involved. And that impact is felt far beyond the handover of keys. And that's one of the things that makes it quite a unique model, because we put profit back into the community, and when the developers tend to walk away from a development, we tend to stick around through our charity, which is called Trellis, delivering economic and social value post-handover of keys for quite some time. To put a figure on what it means for us, we use the TOMS model. There's no similarity to Blake here and Blake's model, but the social value portal model. And we've plugged our figures into that. And we can show now fairly conclusively that for every £250,000 worth of property that we build out, we're returning £302,000 in the first year from the handover keys to the community and the local economic region. And that's quite an impressive figure. And it's all been validated and so on. But it brings me on to a question, which I'm going to ask in just a minute. You know, what is it that we can all do to make a difference in terms of purpose and profit? You see, we've had to do a number of things to make our business work. We've had to carefully control the way we manage costs and delayer the costs. We've had to make sure that we're looking at patient capital through impact investment. Now, there's an interesting market that not many people touch, but impact investment is beginning to come through, and it's a brilliant group of investors. We've had to look at those. We've had to think creatively to ensure that we create a corporate structure that deliberately locks in social value, that deliberately ring-fences the social assets that we've got within our business. So there are things that we've had to do that go right back to the core of the business to re-establish a business that is really set for purpose. So designing the business to make sure it does exactly what we want it to do. First point led me to ask an interesting question. And that question was, why do we still build on site? You know, no other major assembly that I can think of in our lives are constructed like that. I mean, your new car doesn't come to you in pieces. with an extra 10% just in case you need it. You know, modular construction is such a promising solution to housing in the UK for building new energy efficient and environmentally friendly homes. But more than this, if you look at it, it can break down the jobs, the manufacturing and assembly, into packages, work packages that you can then give to relatively low-skilled people. And that's exactly what we're doing in the Northwest at the moment with ex-offenders. We're giving them roles within the prisons. And as they come out of the prisons, they can come and work in the factory for a period of time. And the offending rate has dropped from 65% down to 6%. And that's what I mean about just rethinking the way that you do business. It makes a huge impact to the community which we serve. Just think about it. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could, through a model like this, give Gary the keys to his own front door? Wouldn't it be wonderful if he too was able to come and be employed? Wouldn't it be wonderful if he had a sense of security and a community that he could get into, like those ex-offenders in the factory? Wouldn't it be just great if we could replicate that model and do more of it? And that's exactly what we're trying to do. We've got plans in place, and it sounds ridiculously ambitious, but we've got plans in place over the next 10 years to build 2,500 new homes that are socially purposed through this model. And the economics of it are interesting for investors as well. They're looking at it and saying, well, there's something novel about this business model that hasn't been seen before, because you're building assets, a security base, you're generating profit, and you're putting money back into the community. There's something really worthwhile getting involved here. So the big question is, how can we all, as the people involved in creating and provisioning houses, how can we deliver that deeper and more sustainable sense of purpose alongside profit? The solution, the bigger picture, requires more than just building back better. Neither is it about incentivizing us to build more homes. These things are all part of the package of solutions, and they all have their place in the complex world of housing and community. But you know, there is a need for home builders and developers and housing providers like those in this room, and myself included, to design our organisations so that they're recognised for their social impact, where investment in the community takes as high a priority as the creation of profit and shareholder value. In other words, a world where the fourth G is recognised. You know, we can do this. We, as an industry, can do this if we were prepared to change the way we do business. If we're prepared to change the way we structure our businesses, the way we procure our homes. So those that are buyers of homes, you have a part to play in this, as well as us who provide the homes. We have a duty to the way we all engage with communities. It makes a big difference to how we can create a truly purposeful business. Because once you see the value, and this is the thing that struck me many years ago, once you see the value that can be created by a truly purposeful business, it's hard to accept anything else. And that's where I stand today. I find it hard to believe that we're not doing more for society through re-engineering our business models, because it can be done. We're going against the grain at Goscombe, I know we are. But we're demonstrating there is a way of building where community is placed well and truly at the centre of the business model. We're showing that we can deliver homes using a hyper-local business model so that everything in the supply chain is all within the local region. We're evidencing that it is possible to achieve a delicate balance between genuinely affordable housing, social impact, and shareholder value. And in closing, I just want to make this point. We may need to, or we really do need to, recalibrate our thinking about housing. And to do this, we're probably going to have to find ways of evaluating homes as they were always intended. That is, as a place to live and a place to lay down the roots of sustainable communities that this nation so much needs. The question is, where do we go from here? And for me, there is only one very clear place to start. individual housing companies, modular manufacturers, home builders will never change the world alone. And I think we all understand that in this room. We need our partnerships, we need our collaborations. But perhaps more importantly, we need courageous leadership that allows us to take these few thoughts over the past few minutes and be the change that we want to see around us. Thank you very much.
I think, yeah, let's sit down. That's a very provocative and inspiring speech, so thank you very much indeed, Alistair, for that. You'll forgive me if I push back just for a moment.
You do,
okay?
Right.
So, you talk about purpose before profit, or purpose and profit alongside each other. But is there not purpose in profit? That actually we can be perhaps a little bit dismissive of the idea of profit. Oh, it's all a bit grim and nasty, but actually profits are the thing which drive the economy. They're the thing that create the taxes that ultimately pay for a proper roof for Gary and his kiosk in Eastbourne.
Absolutely, and I think if you take, if you go back to the conventional wisdom of Milton Friedman and so on, where he said, the only reason a business exists is for profit, that's probably where it goes wrong. Because I think the argument I'm putting forwards here is when I spoke about the and model, we need to think about profit and purpose. Because it's very difficult to do anything purposeful if you have no money to do it with. And this is why we as a business are unashamedly, we present ourselves unashamedly as a profit-driven business, which is hard for some charities to look at and say, well, you've got your minds in the wrong place, you're making money. But unless we make the money, we haven't got the money to distribute back into society. So there is always a push for profit, but it's what we do with that profit is the important thing.
I think what's been interesting, I've found just an interview just before we came in here, reflecting on the 10 years that I've known RESi and what's changed in the sector across those 10 years. I suppose perhaps the biggest change of all has been an awareness within the sector, driven in part by the importance of ESG in terms of getting investment. I'm going to discuss that shortly. That actually you do need to have a foundation of principles and values, and without those, actually, you're going to be at sea. And that does appear to be a very significant shift in the psychology of this sector, and I think probably business across the world.
Yeah, I think there are sectors, and I'm not saying this because I'm part of the sector here, but we as a sector have been slow to catch up on that. There are other sectors who are doing it and doing it very, very well. And there are things that we could do that make us better. We could do more to push things on the purposeful front. But I think
it's good business too, isn't it? I mean, we were talking yesterday to Gwyn, who's a young housing company director in North Wales and in the northwest of England. And his model actually very similar to what you're talking about. It's absolutely about the sense of importance of giving back to the community from which he came, but also an awareness that actually, unless you are saying those things and recognizing those responsibilities, actually the wind can turn against you very quickly.
Yeah, it can do. Absolutely. And I think with all of the things, when I started off in the housing industry, because I came from the medical world and the health tech world, so it couldn't have been further removed to come into construction from medicine. But I think to myself, the impact that we're able to achieve here, the things that we can do, it's no different to whether you're in that sector or this sector. You can still drive huge impact through businesses just by applying some different modelling, which is why I was so interested in looking at Blake's model, Tom's model, because that's a retail sector model. Yeah. And we just hadn't entertained the thought that you could bring that model across into the construction sector. Yeah. And so it's been a fascinating journey to see how it can be done. It's not been an easzy journey, I have to admit. There's a lot of challenges, a lot of sceptics out there.
Homes England love you. They're really excited.
I'm really pleased they love us. Long may that continue.
All right. Well, listen, we run out of time. I wish we had longer. But Alistair Wickens, thank you very much. The first of our Spotlight